But there were guards from other prisons filling in that were telling me about where they were, and one of the guards said, he liked his prison better because the gangs were really strong there, and in the prison in Louisiana, it was very chaotic. There weren't people really calling the shots within the prison population, telling people what to do. And he said, at my facility, if somebody doesn't make their bed, they get stabbed. If they mouth off to an officer, they get stabbed. So it maintains a lot of order. So, and I heard this from several people, and there's been lawsuits about this. So it just kind of comes back to the issue of the understaffing and stuff like that. Although at the same time in those prisons, guards get killed sometimes. There's more concentrated hits, that are directed by gangs.
Hi, I'm Kimberly, and I'm a volunteer on the board of Inforum, so thank you for being here tonight. But even more so, thank you for doing what you do, even putting yourselves in peril to do so for the good of the public. I was hoping that you could talk a little bit about risk and reward in terms of the backlash that you received from the articles that you wrote, and perhaps Ms. Woodford could comment also on how it feels to be at the receiving end of seeing what happens in someone else's prison.
Well, I would say that actually, interestingly, a lot of times when I write stories, there's more of a backlash, but the prison transport story, and even the employees of those companies liked the story. They were like, thank you so much for getting our story out there. I mean, the only people that didn't like it seemed, were the people that own the actual companies. And the backlash was just silence. Like, they just didn't talk to us, and then they did invite us there to see some of the changes they had made that we later realized weren't real. But yeah, I mean, that was actually really nice, because a lot of times you do kind of get a stream of, it's not always really horrible, but just people being like, screw you or whatever. But like with that one, a lot of people thanked us, and that was an interesting reaction, especially because a lot of times when you write about prisons, you're writing about what guards have done, and they're very mad. But in this one, we did try to make sure to point out the difficulties they were facing. So they really appreciated that.
When you advocate for the interests of prisoners, do you hear from victims of crimes sometimes who feel betrayed, maybe that you are kind of advocating for their needs?
Well, because I would never say I'm advocating for them in the sense of like...
It doesn't get interpreted that way. I'm just curious if you hear from them in any way, or maybe Shane...
That's definitely happened, where like people were like, you ruined like my life, or you ruined my husband's life by writing about this particular thing, and people do say that to you. And I mean, I find the best reaction is I try to have a phone conversation with someone when I have an email like that, because emailing back and forth on that is not going to work. We're going to get nowhere with that. So I usually will try to hear them out, actually, because I want to hear what people say. I really want to hear their criticisms, because I want to think about it the next time. It's really sensitive subject matter. So you want to be aware of everyone you're impacting, because you are impacting a lot of people.
Hi, I'm Mike, and I'm executive director of a nonprofit called the Public Trust Alliance. And in looking at models for improving the situation, the public trust doctrine has been part of our law since, before statehood. And most of my work is with the Public Utilities Commission and investor-owned utilities, which are doing some amazingly dumb things with respect to climate change. And in taking a look, prison is an inherently public sphere, much like providing resources for water and drink. And to use some of the public trust doctrine as guideposts for moving forward, do you see any, or have you heard of any citation of that particular strand of law in our law, which is based on public interest and its application in corrections?
Not me.
No.
Jeannie Woodford?
I'm not sure that I understand the question.
Well, just I think in terms of just how to function in the public interest, like that's something that's a stated objective. How to make these institutions. I'm sorry. That's my understanding of it.
What is the mission?
That it's articulated. Yeah. You haven't seen any of that.
No, I haven't. But it brought something to mind that's somewhat unrelated. But it's related to, no, it's related in that this kind of idea of like how profit is impacting kind of people that work in the public interest.
Yes.
It's appropriate because I'm up here with the Marshall Project, which is named after Thurgood Marshall. The son of Thurgood Marshall is actually on the board of CCA, of Core Civic.
Oh.
I was recently at a shareholder meeting. He was there, and he gets paid $150,000 a year, to sit on the board. And they, in the pamphlet they passed out, it actually said in it that he was brought on the board to increase diversity of the board. So I tried to ask him like why he does it, and he will never answer me. But he gets a lot of money to do it.
So if I understood it, the Penal Code in California defines the purpose of prisons, and for a long time the purpose was punishment. That's it. And then we, 4 or 5 years ago, what year? 2006, we added rehabilitation back into the Department of Corrections, and so I think adding that back in set the department towards a mission that would improve public safety by providing rehabilitative services to inmates. Is that getting to what your point was?
Some things are too important publicly to treat as private property.
Right.
And that's the basis of the public trust.
Okay.
But it sounds like what you're saying is the closest you've seen to a corporation getting there is to have Thurgood Marshall's relative or whatever on their board. That's what you're saying. We have time for 3 more questions. So,
hi, my name is Jared Rudolph. California's prisons were privately owned for a while. San Quentin was originally privately owned until Governor Weller literally broke down the gates to take the keys back. And they were held by the state until relatively recently. And after Brown v. Plata, there were a number of prisoners, about 6,000, located outside of California and some inside of California. My question is for Ms. Woodford. Do you think that the rise of there's more people currently held in private prisons in California, Californians held out of state? Do you think that's going to be a trend that continues in this state? Are private prisons going to gain more power as time moves on?
No, I don't think that's going to happen in California at all. We've had a cap on private prisons in state of, I believe it was 4,500 for a long, long time, and all efforts to try to increase that have never gone anywhere. And the only reason that California is housing inmates out of state is because of the cap on the number of inmates that can be housed within our prison system. And the state has been doing everything they can to eliminate those out-of-state beds because they're expensive, and in addition to that, you're sending inmates away from their family members. So I think that those private beds out of state will come to an end, actually.
Thank you. Next question.
Hi, my name is Jaden, and one question that I had while I was sitting back here with my friends in my youth. So I know that it's a lot of all my youth, we was sitting in the back, we was all listening, and I was especially. So one thing that I was going to ask is, what more can we do in our communities to help this keep going in progress?
Thank you for the question. It's a similar question that I was going to ask as a potentially concluding question is, as we are looking at that we're on the cusp of potentially exponential growth of this industry, what should we be watching for to try to keep it in check? If that gets at the thrust of your question, what can we do?
Well, I think you have to be involved at the local level in terms of what happens within your county's criminal justice system. And, the state gave every county a lot of money to bring rehabilitative programs to individuals who are involved in the criminal justice system as a result of realignment. And some counties have used that money for things other than programming. And so I think you have to pay attention to what your counties are doing, where they're spending their money, and making sure that that they're putting it into drug treatment, mental health treatment, providing homes and medical care and the things that we know work to bring down recidivism and keep people from being involved in the criminal justice system. I think it's really, really important. And then, fighting against private prisons, I think, is really an important issue as well.
Alicia Santo or Shane Bauer, do you have anything to add to that?
I would just say one thing we talk about a lot at the Marshall Project too is that one of the really difficult things about prisons is that most people have never been inside of one. And if there was some way in some future scenario that being in our society meant you had to know what it felt like, what it looked like to be inside of a prison, I think it would really. It would be so enlightening for people because it's out of sight, out of mind. And you think, that's never going to affect me, that's never going to affect anybody I love. And even if you believe that and still walk through a facility and see what it's like inside of a prison and feel what it's like in there, I don't think you can walk away the same. I just, and for you, like as a young person, just like spreading awareness as much as you can and being as knowledgeable as you can, because the biggest obstacle I think is just that people don't know and they don't care. And so making people care however you can is a really powerful thing.
So if I could just really quickly, being so close to San Quentin, I run into people all the time that have been in that prison because their doors are open to that prison quite a bit. Anybody in this room been inside San Quentin? Isn't that amazing? I think it's wonderful.
Such a unique prison, though, because they let people in.
I think we have time for one final question.
So we have like a combo statement and question.
Okay.
Y'all don't need to know my name, honestly, but my comment, you can laugh. My comment is, I don't know how you guys go to sleep at night, knowing that you do what you do, and saying these things, that it's enlightening to go into prison and to have to realize, and even if you don't have this mentality yourself, but have to tell people this mentality that it might not happen to your family because it happened to my family, to say that it's enlightening and that it won't happen to you and that like you kind of don't have to worry about it and you can be the advocate for them. It's kind of low for you guys, and I just don't understand how you guys are doing this right now. That's just my comment.
All right, my question on that. Okay, so we've had several states, including California and Oregon, where I just came from, that have legalized recreational marijuana, and also, but on the federal end of that, you have our Attorney General Jeff Sessions, who seems to draw no distinction between recreational marijuana and the use of heroin. So, do you also decriminalizing certain amounts of drugs? But so do you? Anyway, my question is, do you anticipate a butting of the heads between our federal government that we have right now, led by our Attorney General, and certain states over incarcerating nonviolent drug offenders?
Thanks for the question. I also, if you want to be able to respond to the previous statement as well, I think it's a strong statement and it's worth a response if you have one.
Yeah, I'll respond to it. I mean, I certainly don't mean it to be hurtful. I actually mean that I think people should care, but I know from the work I do that a lot of people don't. And so I believe that if people saw it and experienced it, that it would be moving to them. Not everybody has the experience of having a loved one, and they're fortunate to not have that experience of having to know what it's like to have a loved one incarcerated. I wish people could understand what that would be like, and that's what I mean by that. I mean, it's interpreted that way. I can't do anything about it, but yeah, that would be my response.
I don't know why you have to respond to that no-name girl's comment when it seems like what you're doing is trying to solve the problem and help.
Sorry.
Help the system get better.
I think, well, if people want to be able to respond, I think they should be able to respond. And so that was the opportunity that they were being given. And if you want to have more of a conversation about it, please do so as soon as we're very close to concluding this conversation. But I think part of the reason, too, that there are large segments of our society that have not been touched by our system of our criminal justice system is in part because those who are in it are not reflective of our population as a whole. They are disproportionately black, brown, or populations that are a much smaller proportion than what they are in they're much more proportion in our population as opposed to how they're represented in our prison population.
Well, I think because of our past drug laws, I just don't know any family that has not been impacted by incarceration, either at the local level or at a state prison, including my own. And so, I'm really, and I also think it's so important to go inside prisons to humanize people there. People think that inmates are what you see on TV, and it's just not so. They're people, and they have kids and families, and we need to care about what happens to them. And so for me, that's why I am so passionate about making changes to our public policy, that we don't incarcerate people when they don't need to be incarcerated, that we now know that it's not the length of the prison sentence that makes us safer, it's what we do with people, what the treatment we provide for them that makes us safer. And so that's really why I do what I do.
Well, Jeannie Woodford, Alicia Santo, and Shane Bauer will be around after this as well for you to be able to ask your questions, because I'm sorry for the person who asked the last question that we won't be able to get to it in this panel, but I encourage you to come up and ask it again. And that's in part because Inform has a tradition of asking, as the very last question as we conclude our program, asking each speaker, what is your 60-second idea to make the world a better place? And I'll start with you, Shane Bauer.
I mean, I don't have like an easy innovation, but I think when we look back on this time, the period of time we're living in, and I mean that in the recent decades that we're living, I think that mass incarceration is going to define this time. And I think that we have to let a lot of people out of prison. I mean, a lot. I mean, we have 2.2 or 3 million people behind bars, more than any country in the world. And doing that takes a lot of things. I mean, it's like changing the power of prosecutors. It's changing drug laws. It's also changing how much we punish violent criminals, because most of the people in prison are there for violent crimes, the vast majority, like 85%. And policing, I mean, there are so many things. Racism in society, I mean, this is deep. The prison system is like the kind of all that stuff mashed up into the end. That's the end. So it symbolizes our bigger social problems.
And for me, it's just really expanding data-driven decision-making. And I think that much of our public policy comes from emotion and from politicians trying to win elections. And so I really think that it's about expanding data-driven decision-making, and that every law, every statute that's passed should have the data behind it to say why we're doing what we're doing. We need to know why we're doing what we're doing.
It's pretty pie in the sky, but I would say if there was any way to really loosen the laws around the records of prisons, one of the most difficult things is that it's so hard to figure out what's actually going on, because the records are kept in a way in which it's a security threat for anybody to know basically anything. It's kind of a blanket denial. So I just think transparency is a really important thing that's needed. More cameras, more public access to what that footage shows. When people know they're being watched or that it could be found out, people behave differently, and that's been proven over and over again. So just really have to shine the light on these places that operate in full darkness, really.
Well, Alicia Santo of the Marshall Project, Jeannie Woodford, former San Quentin prison warden and undersecretary at California Department of Corrections and Rehabilitation, and Shane Bauer of Mother Jones Magazine. Thanks all of you for coming here to share your insights today.
And live coverage now from the East Room of the White House, where in just a few minutes, President Trump is expected to hold a news conference with the President of Finland. We'll have live coverage of their comments here on C-SPAN as soon as things get underway.
Ladies and gentlemen, the President of the United States and the President of the Republic of Finland.
Thank you. Thank you very much. It is my great honor to welcome President Niinistö to the White House. We've just concluded a very positive meeting, and I want to begin today by extending my thoughts and prayers for those affected by Hurricane Harvey and the catastrophe of flooding and all of the other difficulties that they're currently going through in Houston, in southeast Texas, and now it's looking more and more like the state of Louisiana will be also affected. My administration is coordinating closely with state and local authorities in Texas and Louisiana to save lives, and we thank our first responders and all of those involved in their efforts. We're working directly with Texas Governor Greg Abbott, who, by the way, is doing a fantastic job, and his entire staff likewise, as well as with Governor John Bell Edwards, who's very much involved in starting the process of Louisiana. We've pledged our full support as Texas and Louisiana battle and recover from this very devastating and historic storm. There's probably never been anything like this. Under the supervision of FEMA Administrator Brock Long, there has been a tremendous amount of work done. He has been so outstanding in so many ways. More than 8,500 federal workers are involved in the Texas effort alone. I've also today declared emergencies in Louisiana at the request of Governor Edwards. Recovery will be a long and difficult road, and the federal government stands ready, willing and able to support that effort. Right now, the single most important thing is the safety and security of those still in harm's way, including the first responders who have been so terrific and brave. Protecting the lives of our people is my highest priority. Every asset at my command is at the disposal of local officials. Tragic times such as these bring out the best in America's character, strength, charity, and resilience are those characters. We see neighbor helping neighbor, friend helping friend, and stranger helping stranger. And you see that all over. You watch on television, you just see such incredible work and love and teamwork. We are one American family. We hurt together, we struggle together, and believe me, we endure together. We are one family. To the people of Texas and Louisiana, we are 100% with you. We're praying for you. We're working closely with your leaders and officials. And I will be visiting the impact zone tomorrow to ensure that you're receiving full support and cooperation from the federal government. And on Saturday, we think we're going back to Texas, and also we will be going to Louisiana. Nothing can defeat the unbreakable spirit of people of Texas and Louisiana. Right now, every American heart sends its love and support to those whose lives have been upended, totally, by this very horrible storm. We ask God for his wisdom and strength. We will get through this. We will come out stronger. And believe me, we will be bigger, better, stronger than ever before. The rebuilding will begin, and in the end, it will be something very special. And I just want to thank everybody in the affected area, because it has been absolutely incredible to watch the spirit, the cooperation, and the love. I would also like to share a message to the people of Finland, who have recently suffered a terrorist attack in Turku. We stand in solidarity with you against the terrorist threat. We must all work together to deny terrorists safe havens, cut off their finances, and defeat their very wicked ideology. Mr. President, Americans are grateful for your steadfast support as an ally in the fight against terrorism. Appreciate it. Including your membership in the coalition to defeat ISIS. Finland makes important contributions to the coalition and its effort in Afghanistan and has troops on the ground in Iraq training Iraqi soldiers. In Afghanistan, Finland provides troops and financial contributions to support the Afghan National Defense and Security Forces on a modern-day frontier between barbarism and civilization. That's what you have. It's barbarism versus civilization. We are particularly grateful to the Finnish citizens who have sacrificed for our mutual security. Finland is a leading expert in cybersecurity. In fact, we should be calling you pretty soon. You do a fantastic job with cybersecurity, and I congratulate you. And I think in a very short period of time, we're going to be right there with you, believe me. The United States is a very proud partner of Finland's European Center of Excellence to counter modern threats, including cyber attacks. In addition, we look forward to your leadership as chair of the Arctic Council. The Arctic region has strategic and economic importance for both of our nations, very much so. The foundation of our friendship is our shared love of freedom. On behalf of all Americans, I congratulate you and the Finnish people on the 100th anniversary of Finland's independence. 100 years. It's fantastic. In honor of Finland's centennial, the United States is contributing an additional $500,000 to the Fulbright Finland Foundation. Through the Fulbright program, we are sending more of our best and brightest to Finland, forging lasting connections between Americans and Finns. On the economic front, we seek fair and reciprocal trade to benefit both of our countries. I applaud Finnish companies for their commitment to increase investment in the United States, adding new technologies and adding good jobs for hardworking Americans. Thank you. The U.S.-Finnish partnership is rooted in our shared interests and common values. As President, and I must say, and I want to thank you, President, we've discussed and we look forward to further strengthening these bonds of culture, commerce, and cooperation between our two countries so that our citizens and our nations can thrive and prosper together. Mr. President, I'd like to thank you very much for being at the White House and had a great meeting in the Oval Office. It's my honor to have you here. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Mr. President, I want to thank you for your very kind words. And I just want to tell you that it is a great pleasure and honor to be here today. I thank you also for the discussions we have had. They have been of most interest.
Thank you.
We have been closely following Hurricane Harvey. Our thoughts are with the people of Texas and Louisiana. They and you, Mr. President, have shown strength and courage to overcome this catastrophe. It has been touching to watch the TV and see how people help each other. That is what we basically are built of, helping each other. Finland highly appreciates our close relationship with the United States. Today, they are broader than ever, ranging from security to defense cooperation to trade and innovation. We are indeed celebrating our 100 years of independence. I want to thank you for the generous gift presented to the Fulbright Finland Foundation. I want to also to take this opportunity to greet the almost 700,000 Americans who have a Finnish origin. Mr. President and I exchanged views on several international issues. Our broad headline was security. We discussed the importance of the transatlantic bond between the European Union and the United States. History has taught us Europeans the value of unity. The US and NATO presence in Europe and in Baltic Sea are most important, and they are increasing rapidly. Finland is doing its part. We promote dialogue. To reduce risks, Finland has proposed steps to improve flight safety in the Baltic Sea area. They are small but positive steps in reopening dialogue between NATO and Russia. We remain committed to supporting Afghanistan, and we are a dedicated member of the global coalition against ISIS. Finland took the chairmanship of the Arctic Council from the United States in May. We can't afford losing the pristine Arctic nature. Finland firmly believes that business and environment can both be winners in the Arctic. A good example is reducing black carbon. Mr. President, I'm looking forward to even closer cooperation with you and your great nation. I want to thank you. Thank you.
So we'll take a couple of questions. How about we go to Texas? Todd Gilman. Todd?
Thank you, Mr.
Todd.
President.
Yes.
I'm wondering what you can tell the people of Texas to expect in terms of long-term recovery efforts. And in particular, you have been feuding with some key congressional leaders. You've also threatened a government shutdown potentially next month over border wall funding. Are these going to hamper long-term, the funding that will be needed long-term for recovery?
No, Todd. I think that you're going to see very rapid action from Congress, certainly from the President, and you're going to get your funding. It's a terrible tragedy. Your governor has been absolutely outstanding in the job he's done and his entire staff. And I will say that I just spoke with Greg, and he is working like 24/7. We expect to have requests on our desk fairly soon, and we think that Congress will feel very much the way I feel, in a very bipartisan way. That will be nice, but we think you're going to have what you need, and it's going to go fast. Texas is a unique place. It's a great, great state, great people, and I think you'll be up and running very, very quickly, really very quickly. So, yeah, I think you're going to be in fantastic shape. I've already spoken to Congress, and everybody feels for you and feels for what you're going through, but at the same time, they have great respect, even additional respect for the state, because you've handled it so well, so brilliantly. But it's a long road, still pouring, still a lot of rain. Nobody's ever seen anything like it. I've heard the words epic, I've heard historic. That's what it is. But you will have what you want, I think, very, very quickly. And Todd, you can ask a question to the President.
Sure, thank you. Does this situation make you reconsider the possibility of a government shutdown next
I think
month?
It has nothing to do with it, really. I think this is separate. This is going to go really very, very quickly. Again, I've spoken to many of the people we're talking about, and everybody feels the same way I do.
Thank you. And Mr. President, I wanted to ask you, your neighbor Russia has meddled in U.S. politics. They have a military exercise coming up in the next few weeks in the Baltic. There are tensions over there. What kind of advice have you offered and can you offer to the United States in dealing with this adversary?
Sir, we are not feeling ourselves as advisors, but we are feeling ourselves as doing all what is possible to maintain peace. And that is what we are doing in Baltic Sea area too. Actually, you referred to different kind of military training, which is going to happen there. I have to tell you that a couple of weeks ago I met President Putin, and there were media interested in why Chinese Navy is having a training together with Russians in Baltic Sea area. Putin answered that it is not a bloc, it's not against anybody. My answer was that we are also training in Baltic Sea with the United States and Sweden, and it is not a bloc, it's not against anybody. So we have to be very careful that this huge training, huge military trafficking over Baltic doesn't cause any accidental problems, because we know that from accidents might grow whatever. And that is why I think it's important that we continue to work with NATO to enhance, like I said, dialogue between Russia and NATO. And it is going forward.
You have a question?
Finnish broadcasting company, where you are, okay.
Thank you, Mr. President. I have a question to President Trump, if I may. As President Niinistö told, he's been raising the issue about the security situation in the Baltic region and the Baltic Sea specifically, and has been concerned about the Russian planes flying there without transponders on. So, my question to you, Mr. President, would be, Mr. Trump, would you consider Russia as a security threat? Thank you.
Well, I consider many countries as a security threat, unfortunately, when you look at what's going on in the world today. As you know, a few weeks ago, our great Vice President, Mike Pence, who's right here, was in the region and spent quite a bit of time there. We consider that a very, very important part of the world. We have great relationships there. We have a great relationship with Finland. And so I would consider many countries threats, but these are all threats that we'll be able to handle if we have to. Hopefully we won't have to handle them, but if we do, we will handle them.
Can I have a follow-up, as he had also? So if the situation in the Baltic were to escalate, what would the U.S. be ready to do in that unfortunate circumstances?
Well, we are very protective of that region. That's all I can say. We are very, very protective. We have great friends there, great relationships there. We are extremely protective. Thank you.
Sir.
A question for the President? Yes.
No. Sometimes he...
Do you have a question for the President? Do you have a question for the President? It's all right. Yes. Somebody else can...
You don't have to.
Mr. President, Länne Media from Finland.
Okay.
Did you speak about climate change at all? And what about your, Mr. President Niinistö, initiative about cleaning up the Arctic and doing it together with the United States? What kind of response did your idea receive here in Washington, D.C.?
We discussed a lot about black carbon. And to explain to everybody, what happens is that from atmosphere, black carbon covers the Arctic. And we know what happens when sunshine meets black. It melts the ice. And the problem is not only Arctic. If we lose the Arctic, we lose the globe. That is reality. So we must fight against those emissions spreading black carbon. I understood that the United States is going to put it in half. And we know that black carbon sources are, a lot of them in Russia. They are old-fashioned energy plants producing heating. The other problem is flaring. You know that in oil fields they flare up the extra gas, and the amount is huge. Yearly, they flare 40 times more than Finland spends gas. So if we can, and here comes also a business to picture, it would be a good business to renew those old-fashioned plants, to make more with less energy. It would be a business to stop flaring, to take use of that gas which is now burned for wind. And I think that these elements are such that we can continue discussing in Arctic Council. We have inherited the chairmanship from United States, and we continue the work.
We had a very good discussion, in particular on the Arctic and black carbon, and I think we have much in agreement. One of the things we also agree on, we want crystal clean water, and we want clean air, the cleanest ever. Very important. So we have a lot of agreement. John Roberts, yes?
Mr. President, thank you so much. President Niinistö, I have a question for you as well, but if I could start with President Trump. In the middle of Hurricane Harvey hitting on Friday night, you chose to pardon former Sheriff Joe Arpaio. I wonder if you could tell us what was behind your thinking for issuing a pardon for the sheriff, and as well, what do you say to your critics, even some in your own party, who say it was the wrong thing to do?
Well, a lot of people think it was the right thing to do, John. And actually, in the middle of a hurricane, even though it was a Friday evening, I assumed the ratings would be far higher than they would be normally. You know, the hurricane was just starting. And I put it out that I had pardoned, as we say, Sheriff Joe. He's done a great job for the people of Arizona. He's very strong on borders, very strong on illegal immigration. He is loved in Arizona. I thought he was treated unbelievably unfairly when they came down with their big decision to go get him right before the election voting started, as you know, and he lost in a fairly close election. He would have won the election, but they just hammered him just before the election. I thought that was a very, very unfair thing to do. When I mentioned him the other night, you saw the massive crowd we had. The people went crazy when I said, what do you think of Sheriff Joe, or something to that effect. The place went absolutely crazy when I was in Arizona last week. And as far as pardons are concerned, I actually did this just before the meeting because I assumed that somebody would ask me the question. I didn't know it would be you, as you can attest. You didn't even know you were going to be called. But I thought I would. And, you know, Sheriff Joe is a great veteran of the military, great law enforcement person, somebody that's won many, many elections in the state of Arizona. But I wanted to look at some of the other people that were pardoned over the years. And if you look at, as an example, President Clinton pardoned Mark Rich, who was charged with crimes going back decades, including illegally buying oil from Iran while it held 53 American hostages, wasn't allowed to do that, selling to the enemies of the United States. He was pardoned after his wife donated hundreds of thousands of dollars to the Clintons. Then you have dangerous criminals. President Clinton pardoned Susan Rosenberg, a member of the Weathered Underground, charged as part of a bank robbery that led to a guard and 2 police officers being killed. Drug dealers. President Clinton commuted the sentence of Carlos Vignali, a central player in a cocaine ring that stretched from California to Minnesota. Criminal leaker. You've heard the word leaker? President Obama commuted the sentence of Chelsea Manning, who leaked countless sensitive and classified documents to WikiLeaks, perhaps and others, but horrible, horrible thing that he did, commuted the sentence, and perhaps pardoned. President Obama commuted the sentence of Oscar Lopez Rivera, who was charged as part of a violent independence group from Puerto Rico responsible for 28 Chicago area bombings and many deaths in the 1970s and 1980s. Sheriff Joe is a patriot. Sheriff Joe loves our country. Sheriff Joe protected our borders. And Sheriff Joe was very unfairly treated by the Obama administration, especially right before an election that he would have won. So, and he was elected many times. So I stand by my pardon of Sheriff Joe, and I think the people of Arizona who really know him best would agree with me. Thank you very much.
Mr. President, I'd like to claim prescience that you did all the research, but I'm afraid I have to confess the question was fairly obvious. And President Niinistö, I'm sure that President Trump either briefed you today or you're aware of his new plan for Afghanistan that really relies at its core in bringing the Taliban to the table for negotiations. Given the history and the ideology of the Taliban, do you ever believe that they would honor any kind of an agreement that was ever made, or would they, when the United States and Finland and other countries leave Afghanistan, renege on that deal?
Yes. First of all, I want to underline that Finland has been involved from the very beginning to all the attempts to solve the situation in Afghanistan. We have troops there, we have also financial aid going on all the time. We have to try in all possible ways to solve the situation in Afghanistan. It has been ongoing quite a long time, for decades. But to solve it by negotiations, surely you have to have full respect to the one you negotiate, and also full belief that what is negotiated is also fulfilled. These elements has to be all the time present when you discuss with whichever party in Afghanistan.
Okay.
Yep.
I know there might be a couple of more questions, but do you want to take one more? Would you want to take one more? Go ahead, pick.
Well,
Go ahead.
Please.
Again? You're going to give her the same one?
No, she's not the same lady.
Go ahead.
They are sitting side by side.
We have a lot of blonde women in Finland.
Go ahead.
Mr. President Trump, what kind of role do you see as Finland having in the U.S.-Russia relations? Do you think Finland could be of assistance, helping U.S. get better relations with Russia?
Well, I hope that we do have good relations with Russia. I say it loud and clear. I've been saying it for years. I think it's a good thing if we have great relationships, or at least good relationships with Russia. That's very important, and I believe someday that will happen. It's a big country. It's a nuclear country. It's a country that we should get along with, and I think we will eventually get along with Russia. Finland is respected by Russia. Finland has been free of Russia, really, just about one of the few countries in the region that has been for 100 years. And Russia has a lot of respect for Finland, so that's always good. But I think Finland is doing fine with Russia, and I hope that the United States will someday be able to have a very good relationship with Russia also. I think that's very good for world peace and for other things. Thank you.
As a follow-up, if Finland's relationship with Russia were to deteriorate, would the U.S., what kind of assistance would the U.S. be willing to give to Finland bilaterally if we needed it?
Well, as I said before, that our relationship with Finland is a very close one, and we're always ready to help Finland. One of the things that is happening is you're purchasing large amounts of our great F-18 aircraft from Boeing, and it's one of the great planes, one of the great fighter jets, and you're purchasing lots of other military equipment, and I think purchasing very wisely. I know all of the military equipment, and I actually agree with everything you purchased. We talked about it before. I think Finland's really a respected country militarily. It's got large armed forces for its size as a country, really proportionally probably one of the biggest in the world, if you think of it.
I guess so.
But they're very respected militarily, and they're respected beyond militarily. So hopefully it'll never come to that. Thank you.
And President Niinistö? President Niinistö, did you discuss Russia? And did you offer any assistance to the U.S. with their relationship with Russia?
Well, like I said earlier on, we did discuss about Russia, but actually, I don't feel myself or Finland being any advisor to anybody, but we try to do our best, and hopefully we get also results from that. I want to remind you that in NATO meeting a year ago, approximately, it was stated by all NATO countries that with Russia you have to be deterrents, but you have to exercise dialogue too. These two-way elements have to be there.
Yeah, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. President. Trey Inks with One America News. In the aftermath of Hurricane Harvey, do you believe that cutting FEMA's budget is the right thing to do?
No, I think what's going to happen is the FEMA money is relatively small compared to the rebuilding money. So FEMA right now, we have the money necessary for Texas and Louisiana if we need, but the real number, which will be many billions of dollars, will go through Congress. I think it'll happen very quickly. It'll go very fast. And I want to congratulate you on the network. It's a great network.
Thank you. If I may follow up on one other question from
Yes.
earlier. The southern border wall, is your plan still to have Mexico pay for the wall?
Yes, it will. One way or the other, Mexico is going to pay for the wall. That's right. It
sir-
may be through reimbursement, but one way or the other, Mexico will pay for the wall. We're right now negotiating NAFTA. In my opinion, Mexico has been very difficult, as they should be. Why wouldn't they be? They had a sweetheart deal for so many years. It's one of the great deals of all time for them, one of the worst trade deals ever signed. I guarantee you, Mr. President, Finland would never have signed NAFTA with Russia or whoever you wanted to. This is not a deal that you would want to sign. This is not a deal that Finland would know about. NAFTA is one of the worst trade deals ever signed at any time, anywhere in the world. And I can understand why Mexico is being difficult, because why wouldn't they be? They've had it their way. But no, Mexico will pay for the wall. It may be through reimbursement. We need the wall very badly. As you know, Mexico has a tremendous crime problem, tremendous, one of the number 2 or 3 in the world. And that's another reason we need it. And just to add on, tremendous drugs are pouring into the United States at levels that nobody's ever seen before. This happened over the last 3 to 4 years in particular. The wall will stop much of the drugs from pouring into this country and poisoning our youth. So we need the wall. It's imperative. We may fund it through the United States, but ultimately Mexico will pay for the wall.
If I may follow up, on Tuesday you said if we have to close down our government, we are building that wall.
Well,
If
I hope
Mexico
that's
is
not
paying for the
necessary.
wall, why would we
Let me
close
just tell
down
you.
our government?
Yeah, I hope that's not necessary. If it's necessary, we'll have to see. But I hope it's not necessary. The wall is needed from the standpoint of security. The wall is needed from the standpoint of the drug scourge, what's coming through through that area, through the areas that we're talking about. As you know, I have General Kelly here. We stopped traffic coming through 78%. It's going to be, I think, 81% this quarter, which is a record. In other administrations, if they stopped it just a little bit, like 1 or 2 or 3%, they consider that a great thing. We're up to almost 80%. We'll soon be over 80%. But you need the wall to do the rest, and you need the wall for the drugs. The drugs are a tremendous problem. The wall will greatly help with the drug problem, and ultimately that's a good thing for Mexico also. We have a very good relationship with Mexico, but I will say that dealing with them, I've always said, I've talked about NAFTA, you've heard me many times, and I've said that we will either terminate it or renegotiate it. We're in the process of renegotiating right now, renegotiating the deal. I believe that you will probably have to at least start the termination process before a fair deal can be arrived at, because it's been a one-sided deal. And this includes Canada, by the way. Great respect for Canada, great love for Canada. But it's been a one-sided deal for Canada and for Mexico. And the United States workers, all of these incredible people who have lost their jobs because of NAFTA, they're not going to be suffering any longer. It's been unfair for too long. So we will build the wall, and we will stop a lot of things, including the drugs are pouring in at levels like nobody's ever seen. We'll be able to stop them once the wall is up. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.
White House announced that sometime tomorrow, President Trump will be traveling to Texas to meet with officials on rescue efforts after Hurricane Harvey. We'll have coverage of the president's trip tomorrow on the C-SPAN networks. And tonight, a look at the 50th anniversary of the Detroit riots. Over 5 days in July 1967, thousands of federal troops were called in and 43 people were killed. Here's a look at how the riots began.
Heather Ann Thompson, let's go specifically back to 50 years ago today. Put in context specifically what happened on that day.
Well, specifically, it was a night like many, many other nights. It was a night where folks in the black community, in this case at an after-hours drinking establishment at 12th and Claremont, were having a party, having a get-together, and it was raided by the Detroit Police Department. This happened routinely. People were routinely pulled over, routinely, thrown up against cars, stopped, frisked, and in this particular instance, it just touched a nerve. And this particular community, I think, had experienced a lot of that aggressive policing, more than even others. And so it was just like a match to kindling.
That was just some of the discussion looking at the 50th anniversary of the Detroit riots, which you can watch tonight at 8 p.m. Eastern on C-SPAN. Also in primetime tonight, Book TV at 8:30 p.m. on C-SPAN 2 with authors who are on the summer reading lists of members of Congress. And at 8 p.m. on C-SPAN 3, it's American History TV with lectures in history, focusing tonight on Latinos and the civil rights movement. C-SPAN's Washington Journal, live every day with news and policy issues that impact you. Coming up Tuesday morning, Tevi Troy, author of Shall We Wake the President, talks about President Trump's plan to visit hurricane-ravaged Texas and how previous presidents have handled natural disasters. Be sure to watch C-SPAN's Washington Journal, beginning live at 7 a.m. Eastern, Tuesday morning. Join the discussion.
This might be the only government class you ever take. You're going to be a voter forever. You're going to be a juror forever. So I need to give you tools that are going to help you for the rest of your life in those pursuits. Do them well.
Tuesday night at 8 Eastern, high school teachers William Camps and Sunshine Cavaluzzi discuss how current events affect their lessons on history, politics, and government.
As a history component, this is a chance for them to learn a little bit about their story. That their story doesn't begin the moment they were born. Their story actually starts with people who have come long before them, who have shaped the way that the world around them they were born into operates. And so if they start to realize that, wait a minute, this doesn't just start and end with me, but what I contribute and where I'm coming from is all part of this bigger story. And so in that way, allowing them then to take in other people's opinions, take in the perspectives of others through social media, but again, also through video, it gives them a chance to be able to really think, well, okay, this is how I see the world, but why is it that I see the world this way? And how can I maybe expand that a little bit by taking in other people's perspectives?
Tuesday at 8 p.m. Eastern on C-SPAN, cspan.org, and listen using the free C-SPAN radio app.
Last week, Senate Minority Whip Dick Durbin talked about gun violence in Chicago and the link to a lack of jobs in poor communities with gun violence. He discussed the importance of mental health services for those who've witnessed gun crimes at a young age. Held by the City Club of Chicago, this is 50 Minutes.
Thank you all very much. Thank you. Thank you. Jay, thanks for the nice introduction. Ed Mazer, thank you for the many kindnesses you've shown to me and my family. This is my first City Club without Paul Green, and I miss him. And I know we all do. A fantastic person and a great resource, and always had a little jab for every speaker with a tough question. I looked forward to it, and I'm sure you will, in his tradition, make sure I face the music afterwards, too. Donna Fenton there is my